Hey there, and welcome to episode 5. Today we got Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, the next entry in our Godzilla review series. This is the movie I like to say introduces the big four. So, we have Mothra returning, we have Rodan making his debut to the series, and of course we have Godzilla's grandest enemy, King Ghidorah. So here's the thing, if we're going to go ahead and convert Godzilla to a good guy, we need the ultimate bad guy, the best one we can have possibly. Every hero has a great villain. You have Spider-Man and the Green Goblin. You have Batman and the Joker. Just to name a few. Godzilla needs King Ghidorah, and guess what? Toho will go hard with him throughout this series, and this is where he starts, and where his reign of terror begins, and he just becomes a complete thorn in Godzilla's side from here on out. So before I go any further, I do want to go ahead and say that this movie I don't consider as strong as the last two entries. It's got its moments in it, definitely. But the one key thing that probably puts it over King Kong vs. Godzilla and Godzilla Raids Again at least is the sheer fact I like the storyline and the direction of where it goes, I'll say that much. It's just that overall though, when I compare it to the last entry, Mothra vs. Godzilla, to me it just fails to deliver on the level of what that movie brought. One thing this movie does also got going for itself is the fact that I think the final battle, the location of it, is probably my favorite location up at this point. It's just fun seeing something outside of the city, and it's just a lot more appealing than some of the final battle locations in the last few movies. Also, the final battle is just fun for what it is because you're going to see some really unusual things. Godzilla pairing up with his once enemies and now befriending them, and it's just really kind of fun seeing that 3-on-1. Even if King Ghidorah is at a huge disadvantage, it's fun seeing the tactics that they're choosing to attack him. Outside of Godzilla being the good guy, there's a few other new elements being introduced. So by default, Godzilla movies are, sci-fi, but now we're going deeper down the rabbit hole. We're introducing UFOs, aliens, a threat from deep space, basically. And it's crazy thinking about in retrospect, it took 5 movies for this to be added in. Prior to this, it was always, nature's fury, our mistakes, and we're paying for it, and we've created this monster and we gotta deal with it. Well, this time around now we've got a threat from deep space, and now Godzilla's our greatest ally, and Mothra and Rodan, and we're counting on them to save us because we really stand no chance. This is our best chance of survival right here. And I think realistically also it was the only real direction to go because you can only repeat the same idea over and over and over again before it just becomes stale. And I am just a big sci-fi junkie, so this is the only real direction to go. So props to it. This is one of those aspects that became commonly entwined with the Godzilla series, and you'll see it reoccurring again and again and again, and it's well welcome. A major plot point in this movie is the sheer fact that King Ghidorah is on his way to Earth, or might already be here. So here's the thing, King Ghidorah is responsible, single-handedly, for destroying all life and eradicating everything on Venus. Now here's the weird thing about this plot point right here. In the American cut, if you're a little confused, it refers to it as Mars. But in the Japanese cut, it is Venus. Now, I don't know why this change was made. It's really kind of subtle, not really necessary change, but my speculation is because of the fact that Mars is just commonly affiliated, with past life or life at one point, and so they probably just went ahead and just slipped it in there. I personally like the Venus thing more, just because of the fact I don't feel like we portray Venus that often in movies, and it's just kind of fun, and realistically, we also do talk about, there might have been a life on Venus at one point, considering, it's in that habitable zone. But you want to know something? That's a completely another conversation that I could dive into and talk to you guys all day about. You guys almost had me going into a completely different other conversation. One reason that I find this movie to be amusing is the sheer fact that basically this is where the monsters start to get more and more human characteristics and emotions. Prior to this, we kind of saw different, humorous battles, in King Kong vs. Godzilla, but this movie doubles down on things extra. Like, we literally got Mothra on Rodan's shoulder as he's flying around, doing battle with King Ghidorah. We've got all the kaiju arguing, Godzilla and Rodan are going at it, Mothra's trying to reason with him, Godzilla's cussing. It just goes extra, and this is just another reason why I love the Showa era. Some people can look at this as just downright cringeworthy, but you know what? This is another reason why I'm here and why I'm watching this series. This is exactly what I asked for and what I expected from the Showa era, and the Showa era just has way too much fun, like more than it's allowed to have. Number 2 reason this movie amuses me is due to the fact that it came out also in the 60s, and this is during the time period where the James Bond series was just, really kicking off and establishing its own legacy. And parts of this movie and its subplot just feel like a James Bond movie. Just a little bit. Just gives me that vibe, with the shooting and the way it's presented near the end. And it's just one of those things that also, you're going to see more of this in the Godzilla series, because there'll be times you can tell clearly they're looking at things that were big and going on, and they'll adapt certain things into these movies. So this is just the first movie to kind of do that right there. But it's not too overbearing though, it's still one of those things I feel like it's welcomed. I really can find things to enjoy about this movie, I really can. But it falls in the shadow of Godzilla vs. Monster Zero, and that's the movie that I commonly associate King Ghidorah with in the Showa era, just because I love that movie so much more. I'll talk about that movie more in the next review. And of course, Mothra vs. Godzilla was just much more monumental, to me at least. I will say this movie, I also spaced the fact that it came out literally the same year as Mothra vs. Godzilla. I mean, they didn't even wait an entire year to produce another Godzilla movie. I refuse to disregard this movie for so many reasons, and that's due to the fact that basically King Ghidorah was just hard to bring to life. You know, getting those heads so they were as articulate as possible, making sure those wires weren't getting tangled up. It was just complete hell. And, you know, being hunched up in that suit, standing, you know, for hours at a time. So there's a lot of work that was put into this movie, and guess what? It was well worth it, because King Ghidorah now has a well-established legacy because of this movie, you know. This movie is where it's established, and definitely got to take my hat off and tip it to everybody that was on board in making this movie happen, because this movie, like I said, might not be one of my favorites, but it's definitely one of those solid movies in its own right that has its own legacy. I think a proud moment for me was seeing Godzilla King of the Monsters in theaters, because when I saw that movie in theaters, the first thing I did is reflect on this movie at least. And I kind of thought to myself, look where we are. You know, I remember seeing this movie for the first time, and obviously, you know, this is the first time that we saw the Big Four on screen, and seeing how they've evolved. You know, it's a proud moment for a fan, and anybody that watched these movies way back in the day, and just to see how far they've came. One thing I should say before I close out this review is when we talk about Godzilla's transitioning in his character, I think it was done well, because in this movie he doesn't start out as the good guy immediately. Like, he is definitely still considered a threat, and then after that he has his differences with Rodan, and then after that that's when Mothra kind of convinces both of them, and they're not really sold on the fact, you know, of helping her out initially, because they don't want to do anything for humans the way things are, you know, obviously because humans have been a nuisance to them for all they've done. But later Godzilla comes around, and, you know, he just sticks around as the good guy from here on out. So I think it was a good way to execute it. You know, that way it just wasn't being done right off the bat, you know, as the movie starts. Mothra is also going to need Godzilla and Rodan, because, I mean, one Mothra isn't going to cut it. Apparently the other Mothra died, for the record, if you didn't catch that. Don't know what exactly happened. It died in between the events of this movie and the last movie. So, yeah, RIP to the little Mothra that died. A very spontaneous and fun movie, and it is definitely considered one of the iconic Godzilla movies.